we're getting some questions from the Discord. BioCal wants to know what kind of I/O ports it has. We have a clean out on both ends, and it's
Wait, clean out on both ends.
The clean out is access.
A dirt in on one end, and then a clean dirty out.
It's access to get into the line if you need to do any maintenance on it.
Oh, okay.
It's so you can send a plumber snake through and clean out the pipe.
So shouldn't the out be dirty at the end?
Well, it's not like clean, like you want to polish it. It's like if there were a blockage or you need to investigate, you can go in there.
Oh, so that's a clean out. Okay, I get it.
Like flush out might be a better term, but they call it a clean out. It does have good throughput. I did not get any new accessories to go with it yet. And yes, old guy points out it is backward compatible.
Right, that's important.
Yeah,
because those types of infrastructure are usually used with relatively old systems.
Yeah,
begin with, so it has to be backwards compatible. That's
BioCal says,
and the throughput. Honestly, you shouldn't worry about it too much because it's the kind of thing that you need if you want a high-end system, like super huge, like I don't know, commercial grade. If that you need really high end.
Yeah, if I'm going to have a lot of simultaneous users, then I might need to worry about that.
Exactly, but yeah.
Being in LA, BioCal says I might have to look out for fault errors.
Well, there's that. Yeah.
And Tim says he's just sitting there polishing his sewer line right now.
Oh, speaking of LA, this applies definitely to Tom and Roger and anybody who might be in the area with any regularity. And Patrick, when you visit in Pasadena, there is a big swap meet. Have you heard of this? It happens at the Rose Bowl every second Sunday of the month. So I went on Sunday. Oh my gosh, that was the best swap meet I've ever seen in my life.
What's a swap meet?
It's like a flea market.
Okay.
What's a flea market?
It's basically a bunch of vendors give you discounts on a bunch of stuff that would be marked up in a retail atmosphere.
Was it of like a Amazon, but like in real life?
It's more. I mean, the idea of it is sort of like maybe vintage things, or kind of some junk that you might find to be a treasure that someone else just wants to offload. But a lot of it is actually new.
If you might sell at a yard sale, perhaps.
It's a huge yard
eBay
sale.
And Amazon.
Right.
Continue with the theme of.
But there's also food and clothing and stuff that's like, it's not like all a bunch of antiques, although there is a lot of that too, and plants and blankets and.
Is it indoors or is it?
No, it's outside.
It's just like a fairground or a parking lot.
Well, it's in the Rose Bowl parking lot.
Oh, it's actually in the Rose Bowl.
It's outside of the venue, so you kind of walk all the way around. It's big, really big. It was so fun. I didn't even buy anything. It was just really fun.
If they sold little video games.
I have to tell you, Sarah, you need to work on your storytelling skills because
I didn't buy anything.
The end is kind of anticlimactic.
Well, so here's the thing: is I tagged along with some folks where I was like, I don't want to go to a flea market, and they were like, no, it's really fun. You should, you'll like it. And so I wasn't actually planning on like getting an armoire or whatever. And then when I left there, I was like, okay, so here's what you do next time, and I will be there in the December swap meet on that Sunday. Mark my words. You rent a truck. And then you come in with like a cart. Like people have like shopping carts because they're loading up on stuff.
All right, ready?
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Sorry, I got very excited about this.
Oh,
no,
I
what we're saying, and
feel like we should try to pick this back up because you definitely have enthusiasm. All right.
Happens once in a while.
Yeah. No, we could you could go trolling for old tech at the flea market.
There was that. There was everything.
4, 3, 2, 1. Thanks to everyone who supports Daily Tech News Show directly. To find out more, head to dailytechnewsshow.com/support. This is the Daily Tech News for Tuesday, November 13th, 2018 in Los Angeles. I'm Tom Merritt.
And from Studio Feline, I'm Sarah Lane.
And from dark and cold Finland, I'm Patrick Beja.
And from underneath overcast skies in LA County, I'm the producer, Roger Chang.
Thanks to everybody who reached out on Twitter or by email asking if we're okay out here in LA with the fires. Thankfully, all three of us are in places unaffected directly. There was some smoke in the air this weekend, not going to lie. It was pretty thick at times, but they seem to have started to get it under control. It flared back up today, but thankfully, none of it affecting us directly, but thank you for thinking of us. And we are going to talk today about the Amazon headquarters announcement. We're going to talk about the call for cybersecurity from the president of France. But let's start with a few other tech things you should know.
Microsoft released its Windows 10 October 2018 update for the second time after fixing some bugs that deleted data accidentally. Microsoft released the fixes over a month ago, but took time to test them before re-releasing to the public.
Intel announced the XMM8160 5G multi-mode modem 6 months ahead of schedule in order to support deployments of 5G mobile network around the world for launch in the second half of 2019. The modem will provide 5G connectivity to phones, PCs, and broadband access gateways with peak speeds of 6 gigabits per second. 6.
Nice. Peak. Snapchat is adding something called friendship profiles, which highlights interactions between you and your closest friends. There's also Bitmoji stories, which are comic book-like stories that will feature you and your friends' Bitmojis. And you now have the ability to buy t-shirts and mugs with you and your friends' Bitmoji avatars on them, which I think is probably the most genius of all three of these.
Yeah, the first two, I was like, but then I was like, Bitmoji t-shirt. Would buy.
Well, maybe you would, but you're not in the target demo.
Or are we?
Or are you? Maybe that's what they're.
I'm sorry, Sarah, but you will not be able to buy a Bitmoji t-shirt. You're too old.
No, I mean, I don't think these things fit their target demographic, but maybe I'm wrong.
Let's talk a little more about autonomous car service. It keeps saying it's going to come soon.
And guess what? A source tells Bloomberg that Waymo is planning to launch a commercial driverless car service in early December under a new brand name. Waymo reportedly isn't planning a media event around the launch, choosing instead to start small, perhaps dozens or hundreds of authorized riders around the Phoenix suburbs, covering about 100 square miles. Waymo's early rider program already has 400 volunteer families who have been testing Waymo's service for more than a year under non-disclosure agreements. That's surprising. It didn't leak. Alphabet removed the Google branding from its cars and created Waymo in December 2016.
Yeah, so we have talked about the early rider program. The non-disclosure agreements apply to the people not talking about their experiences with there, but it was known that they're doing it. And I don't see too much of a difference between the early rider program and what Bloomberg is saying Waymo might launch, other than a name change.
It sounds like what this is an expansion of that early rider program. Yeah. 400 families is, I mean, that's a decent amount of people, assuming that most families are going to be more than a couple folks. But yeah, it's going to stay in the Phoenix area. It's going to be basically the same routes that have already been tested. It sounds like Waymo is ready to take it to the next step, which is a good thing. And I would love to know what the brand name is going to be called.
That's totally where my head went to. The first thing I did with the Bloomberg story was say it's not the world's first commercial. We've had Nutonomy. Last week on the show, we talked about Guangzhou operating a for-pay service. Granted, I guess it's a public service, even though you have to pay for it, but whatever. That part doesn't matter. I'm more about like, what are they going to call it?
I just want to say, I agree with what you're saying about the fact that it's just an expansion of the early riders program, but going commercial does still mean something. You know, it's like when your game is in alpha for a long time and then launches, it changes the perception, it changes the expectation. So I think it does matter.
Like now you're paying for it. That does change your attitude toward it. Very true.
Google suffered an outage Monday that included not only itself, but other cloud customers when several million of its IP addresses were misrouted. Main One Cable Company in Lagos, Nigeria, mistakenly updated routing tables, which were then accepted by China Telecom which then spread globally. Main one also affected Cloudflare's IP addresses, some of them anyway, with another mistaken table update. Google and Cloudflare both say that they believe the actions were errors, not malicious. Cloudflare CEO Matthew Prince told Ars Technica it was a big, ugly screw up.
Yeah, because China Telecom has been caught doing some weird misdirections over like a 30-month period before. When China Telecom was the one involved with the propagation of this, a lot of eyebrows have been raised, and a lot of eyebrows are still firmly raised because of that. But Cloudflare, Google, the routing, the nonprofit routing organization that handles management of the tables for the internet, they all say this is not what something malicious would look like. They would do a better job of hiding it, especially because all of these IP addresses, instead of routing traffic through China Telecom and then back to where it was going, just died at a router at China Telecom because it didn't have anywhere else to go after that, causing a service outage, which is what caused people to notice it. And it only lasted, something along the order of a day or less.
I do have a little bit of a question. I'm not sure exactly how that part works technically, but what if it was to be used maliciously? Like, could any organization change the routing tables and then get them validated, and that would screw up Google and Cloudflare for everyone? What are the safeguards against this? I'm surprised it seems so easy.
Because the border gateway protocol is not normally encrypted, and it should be. And in fact, Cloudflare CEO made a point of saying like, hey, this is a good time to start cryptographically signing and verifying your border gateway protocols and make that the standard everywhere, because these mistakes can't happen then, or at least it's much harder for them to happen. If this were malicious, what would have happened is the Lagos ISP would have changed the border table in a way that China Telecom would have then taken it, passed it through their country, and then on to its destination. And it would have taken a while for Google to notice, like, hey, this data is taking a little longer, the latency is a little weird, and then they could have tracked it down. But yeah, and it's a system.
But that's if they want to do
ISPs.
Sorry, this would be if they wanted to do a man in the middle and see what's happening through the traffic, right? What if they just want to shut it down?
Not exactly. I mean, you can do a man in the middle without having to do this. That's the other thing, right? Okay. This is all encrypted traffic. So it's not like the fact that it went through China is in any way says, oh, now China has all of Google's data. It's not like that. It's just this data wasn't supposed to go that direction. So I guess if you wanted to be malicious, you could force this to happen so that then you could collect it and try to break the cryptography on it.
No, but what if you just wanted to stop working because customers were not able to use Google?
Yeah,
my point is, what if you want to break it?
Sure. The companies that are in charge, the ISPs in charge of this wouldn't do that.
Okay.
Because then everyone would stop peering with them, and they would go out of business. So, and that's the explanation for this, by the way, is there was a networking conference in Nigeria a couple weeks before this happened, and Google and Cloudflare are one of the few Western companies in the Nigerian Internet Exchange who have peering agreements with this Nigerian ISP. And so they feel like in implementing the new peering arrangements, it was just a typo, basically. So there you go. Amazon's search for a new city to host its second headquarters will yield neither a second headquarters nor be located in a new city. Amazon will build 2 new regional offices in the Long Island City neighborhood of Queens, New York, and another one in the Crystal City neighborhood of Arlington, Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C. Amazon already has operations in both metropolitan areas. Amazon will make its existing operations in Nashville its East Coast operations hub as well. So essentially, there are 3 new locations for Amazon. None of them really a headquarters, I don't think. Hiring, however, will begin in 2019 with average salaries promised of $150,000 a year. New York State is giving Amazon $1.5 billion in tax incentives. Arlington is giving $573 million, and Nashville $102 million.
So, as I understand it, the offices that will be expanded in Long Island City and Crystal City are some of Amazon already employs a fair amount of employees there outside of its Seattle headquarters, and a lot of folks that work in the Bay Area. So there are a lot of folks there as well. Now you have other cities that were in the running to be the next new Amazon headquarters, and some people say, well, wait a second, what did Amazon just kind of know that they were going to do this the whole time? Because these are two very obvious places to just expand rather than go into a new market in order to, maybe, get more tax credits from governments who wanted to make sure that they didn't pull out of these areas entirely.
Yeah. I don't know that is the only purpose. I wonder if maybe that was a side effect that they weren't too concerned about. Like, hey, if we end up in New York and DC anyway, we get all this data about all these other cities, right?
Yeah.
That can't hurt. Yeah, because it does feel like they did a lot of work to end up with the obvious conclusion of like, oh, well, we have 360,000 square feet of leased space in Manhattan and a bunch of full-time workers there. And the third biggest location or the fourth biggest location we have is in Washington, D.C. Let's just go there. Because it's cheaper than San Francisco. That is one study I read on Recode, is that the housing prices in both these places, the Long Island City area of Queens and the Crystal City area, which is right next to National Airport. It's the area that borders National Airport south from the Pentagon, that those are both more affordable places to find housing than Seattle or San Francisco. Patrick?
I want to give Amazon the benefit of the doubt here, but it does sound, maybe you want to make, to do your due diligence and make sure that it wouldn't be advantageous to go somewhere else. But it really looks like they sniffed somewhere else and talked to the people from the cities that they were already established in and went, hey, you know what? Those guys, they're offering us this and that, which is, it's fair. There's no reason they shouldn't do it, I suppose, but it's certainly seemed like HQ2 was a much bigger deal than it ends up being. It ends up in a poof, when.
I think that's the part that bugs me. If we go from Amazon internally saying we need to expand our campuses, where should we expand? And then they say, well, we've got a lot of people working in Manhattan. What if we got Long Island City, which has some office space going unused, to give us a location, and we build a big operation there? Makes perfect sense. Audible's over in Newark. You got a lot of people in New York. You got a lot of talent. If you're looking at Washington, D.C., you say, oh, well, we've got operations there, and AWS is bidding for the Joint Enterprise Defense Infrastructure contract with the Pentagon. Bezos owns a house there. It's the largest private residence in the D.C. area. Amazon is opening a data center in Loudoun County, Virginia, nearby. Possibly in support of the newly announced East Coast GovCloud operations of Amazon. DC makes perfect sense. These locations make sense. What bugs me is that they made a big deal out of how they were going to build one second headquarters and got all these cities who may not have been top of the list to try to compete for it. And it makes it feel like, well, the obvious choices were right there. Why did you make them do this song and dance unless it was just to gather a bunch of data about them?
Well, and 50,000 new jobs, that's a lot of jobs, but split between two cities, it's not as many jobs, that would be concentrated on one singular area. And I know a lot of cities where, that was a huge draw to be included.
Yeah. So I don't know. Leaves a bad taste in my mouth. That's all.
Yeah, a little bit. I think if you're one of the cities that bent over backwards to, try and get that HQ2, it leaves a really bad taste in your mouth. They can't be happy.
Duke Jello points out it's Reagan Airport. No one calls it National anymore. I'm from 1974. I apologize. Reagan.
Here's something that will not leave a bad taste in anyone's mouth if you like podcasts anyway. Pandora launched the Podcast Genome Project. We'd heard about this being in the works in the past. It's a new recommendation system paired with human editorial input to offer podcast suggestions for Pandora users, just like they do with music. Pandora says the Podcast Genome Project uses 1,500 attributes such as MPAA ratings, production style, the content type, host profiles, and also how others are listening on Pandora through machine learning algorithms, natural language processing, and collaborative filtering methods. So, for example, if Pandora knows that there's a particular podcast that everybody bounces out at about 5 minutes in, it's an hour podcast, well, that goes into the data, along with a lot of other attributes.
I love this idea. If Pandora would list us.
Yeah, no kidding.
I think it's great because the idea that it can find through some semantic analysis topics for you, like episodes of shows that you might not have listened to. That'd be great for DTNS if people are like, oh, I'm really into hearing about net neutrality today, or I'm really into hearing about electric trucks, right? Like they could discover our show in a way that is new. And likewise, as a podcast listener, I think this is great because if I say, I just want to hear about this topic, Pandora can surface those kinds of episodes for me. I like it.
Yeah, and that's another something to note is that obviously podcasts can be audio or video, and this is focused on audio because it's Pandora. But I'm with you, Tom. I find podcasts really only one way, and that's word of mouth. If you tell me, oh, there was a great podcast, you have to hear it, then I'll go look for it. Otherwise, I might be able to surface something on New and Noteworthy in iTunes. But for the most part, if I like a podcast, I don't have an easy way to find similar podcasts. Yeah, they do exist within podcast apps, but I find them to be very hit and miss. So if this works the way that the Music Genome Project has been very successful for Pandora, I mean, really, created an entire music industry, then I'm all for it because I love listening to podcasts.
Yeah, this is definitely the one big issue for podcasts and podcasting and podcasters is the discoverability issue. On YouTube, you have videos on the side and playing afterwards at recommendations and all of that, and it doesn't really exist for podcasts. The one thing I do wonder, though, is what would be our MPAA rating? That's the important stuff.
PG for pretty good.
That works.
Hey, folks, if you want to get all the tech headlines each day in about 5 minutes, be sure to subscribe to our sister show, dailytechheadlines.com. That's the opening theme of Daily Tech Headlines.
It is. Yeah. In fact, I was like, ooh, I got to start talking.
Power of suggestion, I guess. All right, let's talk about the fact that more than 50 nations have signed on to a cybersecurity pact announced at the UNESCO Internet Governance Forum in Paris on Monday. President Emmanuel Macron introduced the Paris Call for Trust and Security in Cyberspace to get people to establish international norms for the internet. This is not an enforceable document, and I don't think it's meant to be. It's meant to be a start of a conversation, which would hopefully end up with an enforceable document. 51 governments, in fact, all 28 of the EU governments have signed on. 90 nonprofits and universities signed it, and 130 private corporations and groups signed it as well, including Microsoft, Google, Facebook, Intel, Visa signed it, Nestle signed it. A lot of companies were signed on to this because a lot of the principles of it are about making the internet safer for people. In fact, there are 9 goals. I'm going to oversimplify them a little bit for the expediency's sake. But essentially, they want to protect individuals and critical infrastructure, protect the availability, the accessibility of the internet, stop election interference, stop intellectual property theft, particularly with a focus on trade secrets, stop malware and malicious tools from being used, strengthen security of the internet, educate the public about better cyber hygiene, as they call it, stop hackbacks by non-state actors on other non-state actors, and promote responsible behavior and confidence building. So just generally promote people behaving in a responsible way on the internet. Now, the US, Russia, China did not sign this. And those are 3 of the biggest countries who are having effect on the internet right now. Of course, North Korea, Iran, and Israel didn't sign it either. But Patrick, you had an interesting take on this because all 28 EU countries, introduced by the president of France, is this the beginning of an EU-led model for the internet in opposition to US, Russia, and China models for how the internet should work?
Yeah, that's, I think, what comes out of this conversation. I mean, the goals themselves and the fact that none of this is binding or specific, I think it's easy to deride it and to think, these are just words and it doesn't really mean anything. And of course, we should be nice on the internet, kind of. But that's, I think, a very simplistic view of how these kinds of policies are established and how international relations are managed. I think this is the kind of document that can become an important base for future behavior at the highest levels. And if you take this into account and look at things like the way the EU has been approaching the internet and big internet companies and things like GDPR, which has had an influence in the entire world, I think we're starting to see emerge a different proposition for how to handle ourselves. It's very wide on the internet. Until now, we really had one proposition, which was, I don't know, do whatever you want, which was, I think, the US proposition, which is probably still is. And the other one that has emerged over the last few years has been a tighter, like a very tight control of the internet in more autocratic countries and regimes. And this seems to me like it could be a third possibility. And I think it's an interesting one because it tries to strike a balance and to order things, but not in a way that is restrictive. And as you were saying, the EU seems to be at the center of it, maybe because we don't have a vested interest in the companies that make the internet. So I wonder if that, European vision for what the internet should be is going to be an important one, or if it's going to fizzle out, or if it's actually real. But it certainly seems to be to me.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the internet is beyond nationality still. There is the old way of the internet, which is do whatever you want and it will self-correct. The internet routes around everything. It'll be fine. And I find that prevalent most in open source movements, which are as strong, if not stronger, in the European world than as they are in the United States. They're very strong around the world, but they're strongest there. I think of the Scandinavian companies and Germany as real strongholds of that open source thinking, as well as the sort of U.S. Wild West cowboy version of that as well. But there's also the U.S. policy or the U.S. trend to clamp down and stop the internet from hurting the children, to get those big companies to be answerable for stuff, which isn't that far off from the way the EU does it. It's just that the EU is very organized as a top-down way of approaching that, whereas in the US it's more of a consumer complaint driven situation, I think.
I think there's some of that, but there are also other aspects of it. Like one of the goals is protect availability of the internet. And that can have drastic implications in the way the industry is regulated. And certainly in the US, we've seen trends towards maybe not having effective competition where it might be needed. And I think the interpretation of that point specifically might vary, but it could be interpreted as, well, we have to make sure you have good competition in that field. Education, like cyber hygiene, who's going to do that? Maybe some companies have a vested interest in doing it, but it seems like the kind of thing that maybe a more top-down approach would favor. So I would, as a European, I don't see this as the government trying to say how you should use the internet, but rather what is important in going forward in the way we look at this new piece of infrastructure that is important for society, in the same way that you might look at electricity and say, well, this is how it should go. People should have a right to have electricity delivered in that way, and we should make sure that it works in this protected, safe way, etc., etc. So I don't know if I'm overstating the importance of this, but for me as a European, it makes a lot of sense. And yes, the internet is still transnational, but this vision is something that can be tweaked, can be changed, but it's something that people can look at and think, well, maybe we don't want the Chinese model for the internet. Maybe the US model is a little bit too, the character way is too Wild West. Maybe this is the blueprint for how to handle these things that we would like to adhere to in the future.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting viewpoint on this, and this document, if you read it, is very much about stopping hacks. So the part about availability is about stopping someone from denial of service attacks. It feels like more than competition, but it's also just the beginning of the conversation about this. This isn't the final document by any stretch. So it definitely could include that sort of concern in the future.
Yeah.
We're going to include a thing of the day. Patrick, sorry to cut you off. Last thoughts?
No problem. Go ahead. I could talk about this for hours.
Well, we'll revisit it next week, perhaps. Amateur traveler Chris Christensen is back with a tip for getting on broadband when you're out to sea.
This is Chris Christensen from Amateur Traveler with another Tech in Travel Minute. A new study has come out if you're interested in taking a cruise, but you're afraid of losing your connection to the internet, with which cruise lines have the best ship Wi-Fi service. And leading the pack is Viking Ocean Cruises, which has fast speed and also is free. Their average speeds were given as 50 megabytes per second for downloads and 8 megabytes per second for uploads, which sounds great, but I have been on one of their ships, which is a great ship, great experience, but I think that's for the whole boat. I do have a call out to Viking to double check that. If you are on a cruise line and you really do need to do something like upload a podcast or check your email or upload your photos, God forbid, then the best time to do that is either in the middle of the night, I'm afraid to say, or if you can stay on the ship when other people are ashore, which is kind of limiting, but you are going to find faster speed at that time. I'm Chris Christensen from Amateur Traveler.
Pick your battles when you're on a cruise ship and you need internet. Yes, I've been there, Chris. All right, let's move on to the mailbag. Exalted Cabler, or perhaps Cobbler, has feedback from Friday's show. Tim Stevens mentioned that EV batteries are better because they lack the need for breathers. Exalted says, my wife and I do a lot of serious off-roading, Rubicon, Moab, and mountains much closer to where we live. My reservation for buying an EV Jeep is the likelihood that water will breach any of the electronics, which now make up the entire vehicle, and lack of trust that the car makers will spend the money to completely seal them. With gas, I can add a snorkel, extend my breathers. But the many computers, PCM, BCM, or TIPM, are still vulnerable due to lack of proper factory sealing. Though, for the most part, they won't shut down the vehicle entirely. There'd need to be a long, successful history of banging around an EV Jeep on the trails, through water crossings on multi-day trails, without complete system shutdown before I'd risk buying one.
So you're not an early adopter. That's what this email sounds like to me, because these are all perfectly reasonable concerns. And basically what he's saying is, like, you can prove to me you can really solve these problems, and then I'll think about it. Makes sense.
I think also the issue is you don't want to be an early adopter and be stuck in the middle of the mountain. And so maybe these kinds of uses are not for early adopters, period.
Perhaps.
You know.
Well, Patrick Beja, I would call you an early adopter of awesomeness. And we're glad to have you on the show, as we always are. Let folks know what you've been up to and how they can keep up with it.
Well, listen, if you want more of my early adopted awesomeness, you can do two things. If you like gaming, you can listen to MVGB, which is the monthly video game briefing. That's if you are a casual gamer. But if you're a more core gamer, you can listen to Pixels, and that is a show that dives into the details of the industry and the games we cover. If you enjoy international news, you might be interested in the Phileas Club, which is at frenchspin.com. We just did a special on Brazil. You know, there was a controversial election just a couple of weeks ago, and we had Guy on the show who explained to us why this happened, what happened, and how it happened. So that was a pretty interesting one. That's the Phileas Club. It's at frenchspin.com.
A lot of times folks say, man, why do you keep DTNS to only 30 minutes? A lot of other people say, why does it have to be 30 minutes? But really, we keep it to 30 minutes because that is a manageable amount for a daily show for a lot of listeners. However, if you would like more, there is more to be had about our thoughts in the extended show Good Day Internet, available to our patrons, as well as my Friday Editor's Desk audio columns, where I go into a lot more detail about my thoughts behind why we pick the stories we do. Those are just a couple of the perks you get by being a member of Daily Tech News Show at patreon.com/DTNS.
Our email address is feedback@dailytechnewsshow.com. Thanks for all the feedback. Keep it coming. We're live Monday through Friday at 4:30 p.m. Eastern, 21:30 UTC. Find out more at dailytechnewsshow.com/live.
Back tomorrow with Scott Johnson. Talk to you then.
Bye.
This show is part of the Frog Pants Network. Get more at frogpants.com.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.
Good show, you guys.
Good show.
It was fun. And I'm going to run out or run to bed, rather.
Go to bed.
Run along to bed.
I need sleep, you're a vampire, Patrick.
I wish you pleasant dreams and non-frozen wells.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, thanks. Those are both excellent things to be wished. All right. Talk to you soon, guys.
All right. Bye, Patrick. Good night.
What are we going to call this show, Roger?
Ghostbusters. Oh.
Who are you going to call for this show, Sarah?
Roger Chang.
All right.
Buster.
Amazon primed cities for data. There was Bezos the troll. Amazon HQ that wasn't. That sounds like one of those little golden.
You like the best?
Oh. All right. Cassie, I kind of like the Amazon HQ that wasn't. It reminds me of a children's book, like the little train that couldn't or could.
The adventure
couldn't or could.
The Amazon
the train that could. The little engine that could. Yes, yeah. I think I can. I love
SNL did
that one. I'm just curious if there's any others you want to call out as being particularly clever.
DTNS rated PG for pretty good.
Yes, okay.
Google 404, although technically,
yeah, 404 now.
Cybersecurity is not for the U.S. Practice safer internet. The internet sanitized for your protection.
You like those? Those are Roger's favorites. Roger's shout outs, we'll call them.
Yes.
Shout outs to those who are clever.
Opening Pandora's podcast.
Mm-hmm. So, but the winner still is
Amazon HQ that wasn't.
Amazon HQ that wasn't.
I think I will. I think I will. I think I will.
I won't. It ends differently. The Amazon HQ that wasn't story ends differently than the little engine that could.
And it wasn't bringing things to little boys and girls. Well, technically, I guess it could.
Well, that's what it's doing. Sort of.
Yeah. Amazon
with their parents' credit cards.
Just to boys and girls.
Right.
You know what? What would happen if your dog could understood how to use your credit card to start ordering stuff?
I would quickly capitalize on that.
Look at my freak pet that can order things off Amazon.
It's amazing. I wish
who you gonna call?
Sarah.
Yes.
Can you stoke your flea market enthusiasm, your swap meet enthusiasm?
Oh, right. Gosh, yes.
I want to go back for that.
The Rose Bowl swap meet. Yeah. So anybody who's joining us and didn't hear the pre-show, I had gone to this incredible swap meet / flea market. Small vendors with various wares for sale. And there's a lot of haggling that's part of it. Whatever the price is, there either isn't a price or whatever they tell you, you're kind of supposed to talk them down, which I actually don't really like very much, but some people love that stuff. But anyway, I went for the first time. It happens once a month here in the LA area, and it is huge, huge. I mean, we were there for several hours and I didn't see everything. And, there's food and music and lots of people there. And
sounds like Disneyland. Or Disney World.
It honestly was, and it's funny because Patrick was laughing at me because I ended the story with I didn't buy anything. But it was I didn't realize what a big deal it was. I was just sort of I was tagging along. Sure, I'll do that on Sunday with some friends that were already going. And I walked out of there okay, next month we're going with a plan. We're going to get a picnic table and 100 plants and some clothes and some coasters. I mean, they just have everything. It was really fun.
It's every second Saturday?
Sunday. Every second Sunday of the month. Yeah.
You know, there's
kind of like if you can dream it, they have it there somewhere.
There's that swap meet right next to the Oakland Coliseum up in the Bay Area that actually kept the A's from building a new stadium. The A's wanted the city to give them eminent domain to move in and take that land and build a stadium on it, and the city refused because the swap meet was so popular. They're like, no way, we're not taking away people's swap meet. Like, you can figure it out if you can convince them to sell, great, but we're not going to anger the swap meet fans.
Those swap meet / flea markets can be awesome.
Oh yeah, and it's funny because it's like it's such a mishmash. You know, if you're looking for this hard to find antique map, someone has it. And then you see, I was not looking for that, but I saw one and I was like, oh, I want that. I love it. Or if you're looking for, just clothes that would be marked up 1,000% somewhere in Venice, then that's where you go get them before they hit the shops. It was just super fun. And the people watching is unparalleled. Because it's
all the clothes that you see, I obtained legally. But they're so cheap. Yes, I obtained them legally.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a legal venture.
I just fell off a truck somewhere. I don't know.
Yeah, right.
Not like I did it to you.
I did at one point. I had like a handful. I mentioned coasters because I had a handful of coasters, and I'm like, I'm going to buy these. These are really cool. And then I was like, Sarah, you have coasters. Put them down. This is what happens. You just think you want this thing that seems very reasonably priced, but you have to really be honest with yourself about like, what do I need? Why am I here? You know, don't just buy weird stuff because it's on sale.
Yeah, I want to go. It's just trying to get my kids already out the door. Because I assume it's better.
I think they'd like it though. It's very kid friendly. I see a lot of dogs, but
better to get there before 11 because it sounds like something that gets super packed by midday.
Well, so my theory is because I think it opens to the public around 8. The vendors are obviously getting there at like 5 or 6 because it's a whole production. And then it ends at 3. And we were there maybe from about 11 to 2, maybe, including like sitting down for a while for lunch. And right around the time we were leaving, you could tell that the vendors were like, now we got real sales because we don't want to pack this stuff up and leave. You know, they want to, I think it's like, if you're serious, you get there first thing. Or you kind of wait it out and get there later until people might be a little bit more desperate to part with their stuff.
I'll buy your car, but that's not for sale. It's in the flea market, isn't it? There's $100.
Right. Yeah. Just haggle somebody out of their car.
So we got a lovely printed, I'm going to guess, letter, hand signed by Kevin in Dallas, who said, "Happy Patreon Day." It's dated November 1st. "I wanted to thank you for the privilege to be a part and support such a great show. I wanted to especially thank those who can take the time to vet and prioritize the tech news through the Reddit. I know it takes a lot more than the voices I hear on the show to bring it all together in such a practical and informative show. Also, thanks to you, Tom, for bringing it all together." I thought that was very nice.
Very nice, Kevin. Thank you.
Scotty Rowland and Kyle and the other folks who pitch in on the subreddit do not get thanked nearly enough. So thank you, Kevin, for writing in too, handwritten letter.
It's a lost art.
It's very thoughtful. Boy, is it ever. My handwriting has really gone to the dogs because I just don't do it very often.
Handwriting? Is that
what's that?
You let Otis do all your handwriting?
No, that would really be bad. Yeah, he can't be trusted with things like that. But not that I ever had like beautiful penmanship. But now when it's rare that I'm writing more than just a little something here and there.
On your face, Sarah, looks like a mustache.
What?
The light?
Like the light from the blind.
What if it was a mustache? It's actually kind of cool.
Nobody can see that though. Okay, there's a few people who watch the video, but
the video people can see it.
Sorry, I didn't mean to derail. Continue on with penmanship and dogs.
My penmanship it's very chicken scratchy because I'm just not writing a lot.
It's hard. My hand cramps up after I write like 3
Same.
sentences.
I know. Isn't that funny? It's like
It's
our
like,
muscles have atrophied. our penmanship muscles.
What do you do that you write long enough to cramp though?
Well, it's very rare that happens, but
I'm just trying to think of a time when I wrote something that long.
I was trying to write instructions on the back of like some scratch paper.
Uh-huh.
And I was just like, I got to like the third paragraph. It's like my hand's cramping up.
Huh.
I was actually thinking about one. You remember in school, kids used to get those things that you put your pen in, look like a triangle. Triangle. What do you call it?
Trapezoid.
Trapezoid. Pyramid.
It was a triangle, but 3D one.
Yeah, thing. You grab it. Those things. I was thinking I could win it because my hand was like, these pens are so tiny. I can see why people sign their names using big fat Sharpies because it's easier to grip with like the 100th signature.
Mm.
I remember as a left-handed person, I remember when we were all sort of learning cursive, or starting to write in school, it was first grade because I remember where I was. The left-handed kids all were sort of like forced to use those triangular wedges on I think they were pencils. I don't think anybody was using pens at that point, but because we all were sort of deemed to be holding our stuff weirdly, even though I was always like, what do you care how I'm holding it as long as the end result looks right?
Well, I mean, I was in school and they forced me to use my right hand.
Oh my goodness.
Like, oh no, you're holding that pen in the wrong hand.
Oh, because you write with your right hand.
With my right hand, yeah. But I mouse left.
I mouse with both hands. I'm ambimouse.
You do this, you take both hands and you put them on the mouse and you guide it.
Well, I did
like a Ouija board.
when I started working at ZDTV, I was like, I was so freaked out about getting RSI that I just used my left hand for mouse. It took me 2 weeks to get used to it, but
yeah, I could mouse either way. It doesn't matter, but I also don't use a mouse if I can help it. So
you don't use a mouse?
No, I am anti-mouse.
What do you use? You just do keyboard shortcuts for everything?
Well, or trackpads.
Oh, but you trackpad left.
No,
trackpad
because
right?
the trackpad's right here. So it's like, it's just whatever hand is,
you
all
off with the trackpad.
I never, well, okay. Now that I'm thinking about it, it's like, I was about to say, I never only use one hand. They're always both there, but that's not really true.
Okay.
I could have either hand away and it would be fine, but I'm most comfortable with both hands just kind of resting there. And then I just use whatever is most convenient based on what I'm doing.
Definitely use my left hand on the trackpad.
Exclusively?
Pretty much. Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, you might be more of a lefty than I am. I definitely, I write, if doesn't happen that often anymore, but it's like, I'm not going to write with my right hand. It's never going to happen. But I do plenty of things with my right hand because, over time, somebody, taught me, like, for example, scissors. I can't even use scissors with my left hand. It would be a disaster. I just, but I can be pretty precise with my right hand because it's just the way it's always been.
So we're all ambidextrous to an extent, which is why we're all on this show together.
Mm-hmm.
It's an ambi show.
Yeah.
It's an ambi show.
We'll discuss our idea for our new ambidextrous podcast in the audio version of Good Day Internet, which continues shortly. Thanks, video folks, for watching. Audio folks, stick around.